All right, so today we're going to be diving into some pretty interesting territory.
Okay.
You familiar with Joe Rogan, the podcasting king?
Most definitely, yeah.
So
Yay name.
he was supposed to interview Kamala Harris on his show,
Oh, wow.
and it unexpectedly just fell apart.
Really?
Yeah,
His show's known for those long, unfiltered conversations.
exactly.
What happened?
That's what we're going to be unpacking.
Okay.
So we've got clips and transcripts from his show
Oh, right.
where he talks about the whole situation, and you're going to be surprised
Okay.
at some of the stuff he says.
Okay.
So Rogan seems genuinely frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
He said he was super flexible and willing to work around her schedule completely, day or night,
Interesting.
which I think does suggest he was invested in making this conversation happen.
Yeah, it speaks to the value he places on open dialogue,
Right.
which is the cornerstone of his podcast's appeal.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more intriguing.
Okay.
He says Harris's team wanted to control everything. The setting, the topics, even the questions. They wanted a pre-planned scripted interview,
Oh.
which is totally opposite to Rogan's whole style.
Yeah.
Free-flowing.
Yeah. Free-flowing, unscripted conversations.
Right.
That clash of styles is really fascinating.
Yeah,
On the one hand, you can understand a politician's team wanting to manage the message,
totally.
especially in a forum known for its unpredictable nature. But on the other hand, it raises questions about authenticity
Right.
and whether a truly genuine exchange can happen under such controlled conditions.
It gets right to the heart of what makes Rogan's podcast so popular, right?
Absolutely.
That feeling of raw, unfiltered conversation.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to go off script,
Right.
and that's what draws people in.
Uh-huh.
But it also makes some people uneasy,
Yeah.
especially those in positions of power.
It highlights the inherent tension between the desire for controlled messaging
Yeah.
and the potential for genuine, unscripted moments that can reveal more about a person's character and beliefs. It's a balancing act that many public figures grapple with. And in this case, it seems the two approaches were just incompatible.
Exactly. And, you know, this whole thing with Harris's team wanting to control the interview actually leads perfectly into Rogan's next point,
Okay.
which is about how people perceive him politically.
Right.
He pushes back hard against this idea of being labeled a right-wing métier guy,
Interesting.
which is something he gets all the time.
I've seen that label attached to him quite a bit, particularly in online discussions and media portrayals.
Yeah.
It's interesting how readily people categorize others,
Yeah.
especially in the polarized climate we're in.
He calls himself politically homeless, which I found super interesting.
Okay.
He even mentions being a Bernie Sanders supporter in the past.
Really?
What do you make of that?
It definitely challenges those easy labels that people try to stick on him. Politically homeless suggests an unwillingness to be confined to rigid ideological boxes. And his past support for Sanders, a figure often seen as the polar opposite of the right-wing label, adds another layer of complexity to his political identity.
So it seems like Rogan is someone who resists easy categorization,
Exactly.
which is kind of refreshing in a world where everyone wants to put people in neat little boxes.
And I think it speaks to a broader trend we're seeing.
Yeah.
Where people are increasingly rejecting those traditional political labels and identifying as independents or feeling disillusioned with the existing party systems. It suggests a growing desire for more nuanced and flexible political identities that go beyond that traditional left-right spectrum.
And you know what?
Yeah.
That actually ties into another point Rogan makes.
Okay.
He seems pretty disillusioned with both sides of the political spectrum these days. He talks about how tribalism and groupthink have taken over.
Right.
And people have forgotten how to have rational conversations or work towards the common good.
That's a sentiment we hear echoed by many, regardless of their political leanings. The sense that the political landscape has become so polarized,
Right.
so focused on us versus them,
Yeah.
that it's hindering our ability to address the real challenges facing society.
He's basically saying we've lost sight of the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
We're so caught up in our own little tribes that we can't see the forest for the trees.
It's a powerful metaphor.
Yeah.
And one that resonates with many who feel frustrated by the current state of political discourse. This sense that we're trapped in echo chambers, constantly reinforcing our own beliefs and demonizing those who hold different views.
Right.
Rather than engaging in constructive dialogue and seeking common ground.
And, Rogan doesn't just speak in generalities.
Yeah.
He gets into specifics about his criticisms, especially with some progressive stances on things like the war in Ukraine, online censorship, and the World Health Organization. He even says these stances have shifted dramatically from what he remembers liberalism being about when he was younger.
It's interesting how he ties this back to his own experience,
Right.
suggesting a personal evolution in his understanding of these issues.
Right.
It speaks to the fluidity of political ideologies and how they can shift over time, influenced by personal experiences, societal changes, and exposure to new information.
He specifically mentions the ACLU.
Okay.
And how they used to defend the right of even Nazis to speak.
Right.
Just on principle.
Yeah.
He seems to be saying that there used to be more of a commitment to free speech, even for unpopular opinions, and that's waning these days.
The ACLU's defense of free speech, even for groups with reprehensible ideologies, is a cornerstone of American civil liberties and a frequent topic of debate.
Yeah.
It raises those tough questions about where the line is drawn between protecting free expression and preventing harm.
Yeah.
And it's a debate that's only intensified in recent years with the rise of social media and the spread of misinformation online.
So Rogan is essentially saying that maybe we've become a bit too quick to silence dissenting voices, even if we find their views offensive or disagree with them.
That's one interpretation. And it speaks to the complexity of this issue. On the one hand, you have the principle of free speech, which is essential for a healthy democracy.
Right.
But on the other hand, there's the potential for harmful speech to incite violence or discrimination.
Right.
Striking that balance is an ongoing challenge.
Yep.
And Rogan's comments highlight the need for thoughtful consideration of both sides of the argument.
All right, so we've got Rogan's frustration with the canceled interview, his evolving political stance, and this idea that he's disillusioned with both sides of the political spectrum, particularly what he sees as a shift in some progressive stances.
Right.
What ties all of this together, do you think?
I think what connects these threads is Rogan's deep concern about the state of conversation itself. He seems to be arguing that we've lost the ability to engage in nuanced, respectful dialogue, especially when it comes to politics.
Yeah.
And he sees this as a fundamental threat to our ability to address the complex challenges we face as a society.
It's like he's saying that if we can't even talk to each other, how are we ever going to solve anything?
Right.
And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of this deep dive.
You know, it's fascinating how Rogan connects this disappointment over the canceled Harris interview to this broader critique of political discourse.
Right.
He seems to be saying that the same forces that shut down that conversation, the desire for control, the fear of unscripted moments, are also stifling productive dialogue on a larger scale.
Yeah, it's like he's drawing a parallel between that specific incident and what he sees as a broader trend in society.
Yeah.
This aversion to open, honest conversation.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to challenging or controversial topics.
Right. And this ties directly into Rogan's belief that social media is amplifying this problem.
Okay.
He argues that these platforms, with their algorithms and echo chambers, are making it harder for people to break free from their own limited perspectives and engage with diverse viewpoints.
He's not alone in that assessment.
Right.
A lot of people are concerned about the impact of social media on political discourse.
Yeah.
How do you see it?
There's no doubt that social media has had a profound impact on how we consume and engage with information, particularly when it comes to politics. It's made it easier than ever to connect with like-minded individuals, which can be a positive thing. But it's also made it easier to get trapped in these echo chambers where we're only exposed to information that confirms our existing beliefs.
It's like we're constantly being fed a curated version of reality, like one that reinforces our own biases and makes it harder to see the world through different lenses.
And that can lead to a dangerous cycle of confirmation bias and polarization, where we become less willing to consider alternative perspectives and more likely to demonize those who disagree with us.
So if social media is part of the problem, what's the solution?
Right.
Rogan keeps talking about better speech.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that?
I think what he's advocating for is a more thoughtful, respectful, and nuanced approach to conversation, especially when it comes to politics. It's about moving beyond the us versus them mentality, and recognizing that even when we disagree, we can still have productive conversations and learn from each other.
He seems to be saying that we need to rediscover the art of civil discourse, right?
Precisely.
That ability to engage with opposing viewpoints.
Yeah.
Without resorting to personal attacks or shutting down the conversation altogether.
It's about recognizing that the person on the other side of the political divide is still a human being.
Yeah.
With their own experiences, values, and beliefs.
Right.
And that even if we fundamentally disagree with those beliefs, we can still engage with them in a respectful and constructive manner.
It's about finding common ground. Even in the midst of disagreement, right?
Yeah.
And maybe even learning something new along the way.
And it's about recognizing that progress is rarely achieved through shouting matches or silencing opposing voices. It's through open dialogue, through the exchange of ideas, through the willingness to listen and learn from each other, that we can move forward as a society.
And you know what's interesting is that Rogan isn't just talking about this in the abstract.
Right.
He's actually trying to live it out in his own podcast.
Yeah.
He interviews people from all walks of life, from different political backgrounds with different perspectives.
That's a key part of his appeal, isn't it?
Right.
This willingness to engage with a diversity of viewpoints, even those he might personally disagree with.
Right.
He creates a space where these conversations can happen often in a raw and unfiltered way.
And that's not always easy, right?
Right.
He's been criticized for giving a platform to certain voices, for not pushing back hard enough on certain viewpoints.
Right.
But I think there's something to be said for creating that space for dialogue.
Yeah.
Even if it's messy or uncomfortable at times.
It goes back to that idea of combating bad speech with better speech.
Right.
It's about trusting that in a free and open exchange of ideas, the truth will ultimately prevail.
It's about having faith in the power of reason and persuasion, rather than resorting to censorship or silencing those we disagree with.
And it's about recognizing that sometimes the best way to challenge a harmful idea is to expose it to the light of day. To subject it to scrutiny and debate rather than trying to suppress it.
It's like saying, let's have this conversation out in the open.
Yeah.
Let's hear all sides, and let's trust that people are intelligent enough to make up their own minds.
Exactly. It's about empowering individuals to think critically, to evaluate information for themselves, and to engage in reasoned discourse, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable.
And that brings us back to the question of personal responsibility.
Right.
If we want to see a more civil and productive public discourse, it starts with each of us taking responsibility for how we engage in these conversations.
It's about being mindful of our own biases, our own tendencies to retreat into echo chambers, our own knee-jerk reactions to opposing viewpoints.
Right.
It's about challenging ourselves to step outside of our comfort zones and engage with the world in a more open and curious way.
So it's not just about listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, right?
Right.
It's about taking those principles of open dialogue, respectful debate and critical thinking, and applying them to our own lives, our own conversations, our own engagement with the world.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that each of us has a role to play in shaping a more positive and productive public discourse. And that starts with being mindful of how we engage in these conversations, both online and offline.
It's about recognizing that the quality of our public discourse is a reflection of the choices we make as individuals. The way we interact with each other, the way we consume and share information, the way we respond to those who hold different views.
And it's about believing that a better future is possible if we're willing to do the work to engage in those difficult conversations, to bridge those divides, to build a more just and equitable society together.
It's a call to action, isn't it?
It is.
It's about saying, okay, we might not be able to control everything that happens in the world, but we can control how we show up, how we engage, how we contribute to the conversation.
And that's where the real power lies. It's in our individual choices, in our collective willingness to embrace those principles of open dialogue, respectful debate, and critical thinking. That's how we create a more informed, engaged, and empowered citizenry. That's how we build a better future.
And with that, let's take a quick breather.
No? Yeah.
And come back for the final part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Where we'll explore how you can take these insights and apply them to your own life. Okay, so we're back.
Back again.
For the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Into Joe Rogan's thoughts on politics and conversation.
Right.
We've covered a lot of ground, from his canceled interview with Kamala Harris to his critique of social media and his call for better speech.
Yeah.
But what does all of this mean for you?
Right.
How can you take these insights and apply them to your own life?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's something Rogan himself emphasizes.
Right.
This idea of personal responsibility.
Right.
He's not just pointing fingers at politicians or social media companies.
Right.
He's challenging each of us to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, how am I contributing to the problem? And what can I do to be part of the solution?
It's a powerful call to action.
It is.
And it starts with recognizing that we all have a choice in how we engage with the world.
Yeah.
We can choose to retreat into our echo chambers, surround ourselves with people who agree with us, and shut down conversations that make us uncomfortable.
Right.
Or we can choose to do something different.
We can choose to be open to new ideas.
Yeah.
Even if they challenge our beliefs.
Right.
We can choose to engage in respectful dialogue, even with those we disagree with.
Yeah.
We can choose to seek out diverse perspectives.
Right.
And listen with an open mind and heart.
It's about recognizing that even in a world that feels increasingly divided, we still have the power to create spaces for connection, understanding, and even, dare I say, agreement.
It all starts with small steps.
Right.
Absolutely.
It might be as simple as following a social media account that presents a different viewpoint than your own. Or engaging in a respectful conversation with a family member or friend who has different political beliefs.
Yeah.
It's about breaking out of those comfortable bubbles and exposing ourselves to a wider range of perspectives.
It's like exercising a muscle.
Right.
The more we practice engaging in thoughtful and respectful dialogue, the easier it becomes.
Yeah.
And the more we open ourselves up to different perspectives, the more we realize that the world is a lot more nuanced and complex than we might have initially thought.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's in that complexity and that messy middle ground where we're forced to confront our own biases and assumptions that real growth and understanding can occur.
Exactly.
So it's not about pretending that our differences don't exist.
Right.
It's about recognizing that those differences are actually a source of strength, a source of learning, a source of innovation.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the diversity of thought and experience that makes us human.
And it's about recognizing that we're all in this together. Yeah. We all want a better future for ourselves, our families, and our communities. And the only way we're going to achieve that is by working together, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
Even when we disagree.
It's about remembering that at the end of the day, we're all human beings sharing this planet.
Right.
We have more in common than we might realize.
We all have hopes, dreams, fears, and aspirations. We all want to feel safe, loved, and respected. Yeah. And we all have a role to play in creating a world where those things are possible for everyone.
That's a beautiful thought.
It is.
And it brings us back to Rogan's central point.
Yeah.
The only solution to bad speech is better speech.
Yeah.
It's about having the courage to speak up.
Yeah.
To speak out, to speak our truth.
Right.
But to do so in a way that invites dialogue, that fosters understanding, that builds bridges rather than walls.
It's about recognizing that words have power.
Right.
And that we can use that power to create positive change in the world.
Right.
We can use it to inspire, to educate, to challenge, to connect, and to heal.
And it all starts with a conversation.
That's right.
So go out there and start talking to each other.
Yeah.
Really talking to each other. Listen with an open mind.
Yeah.
Speak with an open heart.
Yeah.
And see what amazing things you can create together.
Keep those conversations going. Keep challenging yourselves. Keep learning. Keep growing.
Right.
And keep believing in the power of dialogue to make the world a better place.
This has been such an incredible journey.
It has.
I hope this deep dive has inspired you to think differently about the power of conversation and your own role in shaping a better future.
Right.
Until next time,
it is
keep diving deep.